Why Gamestop is worth $500 a share, or will be very soon. Hey guys, I am excited to share this presentation with you. I put a lot of hard work into this. I really believe that you're going to like this content, and if you do, I would love it if you like the channel, subscribe to the channel, like the video. But other than that, let's go ahead and dive right into this. Gamestop is worth $500 a share, or at the very least it will be very soon. I do want to give some credit before we dive into this. This is loosely inspired by You Juxtapose Life's Reddit post titled GameStop Price Analysis Still a DFV. You know what that means, I'm sure. Still a DFV under $550. There were just some pieces. I made this fit more so where I think things are going, but there are some pieces that user put together in my mind, and I found those things helpful. So first of all, bear with me. I really hope you stick with me on this one. A couple boring slides and then we'll get into the fun stuff. But the value of a stock, please stick with me. Price earnings ratio, if you know what a price earnings ratio is, it's essentially the value of a stock is based on its stock price divided by its earnings per share. But I've had a working hypothesis with this that I actually started thinking about this after the dot-com boom in the 90s. Yes, I was alive. I was a thinking human being in the 90s. And so I've just been thinking about what kind of access the internet gave us and how that affects stock prices. And so picture with me before the 90s, before the internet even, gasp, I know, this is generally how PE ratios were looked at. Traditionally, a stock was considered a good value if it had a PE ratio of 10 or under, and overvalued with a PE ratio of 15 or over. And much to the horror of our parents and grandparents, those days are long gone and they are never coming back. All right, so think with me for a second. What did the internet bring that didn't exist before? It brought, in a sense, some kind of global access to the stock market that didn't exist before. The advent of things like E-Trade, where I have an E-Trade account. I haven't logged into it in years. I still have some stocks in there. They have not accrued value, unfortunately. And so E-Trade, it was a phenomenon where I could, on my own, without calling my broker, initiate a trade, and E-Trade would only charge me $10 a trade to buy or sell a stock. And what that did is it increased players in the market. And so that drove up stock prices, that drove up PE ratios, and all of a sudden we were at a point where everyone with a mindset of, this PE ratio needs to be between 10 and 15 for it to be of value, they were losing their minds because all these stocks all of a sudden in their minds became overvalued. And then what happened? Even more so, companies like, I'm going to say it, I'm sorry, trigger alert, Robinhood, Webull, but even more so, the global access to internet spreading, things like Wall Street Bets on Reddit. This is another point where just access is increasing even more. I wouldn't be surprised if my father died in 1992. I would be shocked if he had ever owned a stock in his life. When it's time for me to go, I wouldn't be surprised if a large majority of the people in the world owned something. Some kind of stock, because economic growth is happening everywhere. In Africa, in Brazil, in East Asia, all these places. And what's that is doing is introducing all this new money to a place where it didn't exist before, which is driving PE ratios up. So in my opinion, we are in an era, oh, maybe that was a Freudian slip there, an era of PE ratio price discovery mode. Is the market a bubble? Yes, I do believe that it is. I don't believe, as Ron Paul says, which I'm a Ron Paul supporter, or at least I was in 2012. I don't believe that we are in the biggest bubble in the history of the stock market. But all of this money that's being introduced, all this funny money, not just by the Federal Reserve, but by the ECB, by all these countries just devaluing their currencies. Yes, it's creating a bubble, but they're attributing all of that, all of the growth in the stock market to that. And I would say, actually, that it's global access to the stock market has been just as much of a contributor. And so when will we crash? Yes. When will we crash? I don't know. It could still be years out, or it could be tomorrow. But let me share with you some PE ratios of popular companies off the top of my head. Apple is in the 30s. Facebook is in the 30s. Microsoft is in the 30s. Amazon is in the 70s. All these are higher than a PE ratio of 15. And that's causing our boomer parents to freak out. Tesla is over 1,000. And I absolutely believe that Tesla is still overvalued. I've been saying that since Tesla was priced at $900 a share. I don't see it yet with Tesla. I do believe, all right, some of you are going to rip on me for this. I do believe that Tesla will reach its fair value and that the stock price will be worth what it is right now and even higher in the future. But right now, that's an insane PE ratio. So, this, in my opinion, the PE ratio is not, at this point, a very good way to value the worth of a stock. In my opinion, the PS, price to sales ratio, is much better and has it's Warren Buffett. This is his opinion as well, that the price to sales ratio is the way to determine if a stock is a value stock nowadays. And so what is the price to sales ratio? The value of a stock is based on its market cap divided by its revenues. And so you look at GameStop's market cap, you look at their revenues, just for example, and you see a price to sales ratio that is actually not that bad. Its price to earnings ratio doesn't even show up because what happened? The pandemic. And so GameStop reported losses in their earnings, and just like any other company, a lot of other companies, a lot of aviation companies, Boeing posted huge losses, and their stock has recovered quite nicely since then. And so price to sales is a better indicator in times of a global pandemic, when things will affect revenues and earnings and things like that. In today's market, this is a more effective tool in examining whether a company's stock price is overvalued or undervalued. If a company is dying, this is a worthless metric. I mean, all metrics are worthless if a company is dying. And you know why I'm saying that, right? Because of the opinion about a year ago at this time that GameStop was dying, or that it was pretty much dead. Nothing is going to be a good metric for how much that company is worth. But if a company is recovering from a major event, i.e. a global pandemic, i.e. a scandal, this will be a much more helpful tool than the PE ratio. One thing that comes to mind is about a decade ago, BP had this massive oil spill, which caused the stock price to plummet. And if you looked at the price to sales ratio, yeah, there was a lot of major news with that. There was definitely that affected their brand and everything. But that was an incredible buying opportunity for BP at that time. And PE ratio was helpful, but the price to sales ratio was very helpful in that. Case in point, the most recent GME earnings report, they didn't post losses this time because they're recovering from the pandemic, and they posted very good internet e-commerce sales increases. And so, price to sales ratio will be helpful with that. And this is something I preached starting back in January or so, when the craziness with GME ignited. Around the time, if you remember, GameStop topped out at $480 a share, and then went all the way down to about $38 a share. And somewhere around the $170 range, I started, especially on my Discord, which I encourage you to join, I started preaching to the people there, GameStop is actually worth this much. I do believe that. And people would ask me, what are you basing that off of? And what I would tell them is price to sales. You've got to look at price to sales. And I believe that GameStop is at a point right now, in January at least, where the price to sales, these numbers are looking good. And so here's a comparison of GameStop to other major companies. Let me move myself out of the way real quick. So we have GameStop right in the middle. And I did take this chart, and I'm thankful for it, from the user that I mentioned in the beginning of this video. But on one side of GameStop, on the right side of GameStop here, you have traditional brick and mortar companies, Target, Walmart, Best Buy, that have lower price to sale ratios than what do you have here? You know, these more so e-commerce type companies. Now, I could see GameStop being very much like Apple. I mean, Apple, what do you think of Apple when you think of, are they e-commerce, are they brick and mortar? Well, they have brick and mortar for sure, but they're in the middle, more so e-commerce than brick and mortar. But this is based on GameStop's price today of $191 a share. Up until January, I might actually cover this on the next page, but GameStop, in my opinion, is exactly where it should be right now. It should be right in the middle of the brick and mortar and the e-commerce. And this is a good comparison. So let me share with you my takeaways, and I'm going to bounce back to this page a few times. So takeaways from this, and I'll move myself back down. Does GameStop have a future? Again, remember, if a company is dying, no metric is going to be helpful in understanding the value of a stock. Does GameStop have a future? We have to ask this question. Pre-pandemic, the answer seemed to be no. When the pandemic kicked in, the answer seemed to be absolutely not, which is why the hedge funds got in and started shorting this like crazy. They're not stupid. That was a logical decision that it made sense. Questioning the ethics, the morals of that's another video. But as far as hedge funds jumping in on this and destroying a dying company, it made sense for them to get in on GameStop. The profits seemed to be there very much. It was a no-brainer. And you look at GameStop's fundamentals, I would encourage you to check out my video titled, What is an FTD Squeeze? I made it a couple weeks ago. And I talk about GameStop was just rolling in debt, and the debt seemed to be increasing and accruing, and then something changed. And that's where I'm going with this. At some point last year, the answer changed from absolutely not. Does GameStop have a future? Absolutely not. Some point last year, the answer changed to, without a doubt, yes. Now, it depends on who you ask. If you ask DFV on Reddit, he would have said in April of last year, GameStop has a future, and it is going to be strong, and I am excited, and I am in. In my opinion, it was around September of last year when I would have confidently said GameStop has a future. And that is when Ryan Cohen bought 12.3% of GameStop and all of a sudden introduced this level of liquidity that instead of being flooded in debt, they had things to work with and they had a direction to move financially that positioned them very nicely. And so with that in mind, this is how I always analyze the previous chart, which I will go back to after I read point 2. Best Buy was always my comparison when it came to price to sales, which would have put the value somewhere between $60 and $100. Let me go back here. Price to sales. Oh, that's forward. Price to sales. Best Buy. Why would I compare GameStop to Best Buy? I think of them as very similar. Yes, Best Buy has an online presence, but Best Buy's niche is as a brick and mortar store where you can get overpriced electronics. And I just thought GameStop's best comparison is Best Buy. Will Best Buy exist 10 years from now? I think so. I think they have a place. But I worked at Best Buy in the early 2000s, and let me tell you, Best Buy now compared to then, it is a totally different company. It is a company with much less hope for the future, and it's just been dominated by Amazon, by other retailers. And so I thought Best Buy, up until sometime around January, I thought Best Buy was the best comparison, which, if you look at Best Buy's price to sales ratio, GameStop, even in January, even in December, when GameStop was in the teens, I thought their actual value should have been about $60 to $100 a share based on price to sales. Okay, so next. Point 3 on that next page. The previous earnings report confirmed everything that I already suspected about where the company is heading, which means that Best Buy is no longer a valid comparison with price to sales. And GameStop is priced exactly where it should be right now. I already mentioned that. GameStop being in the middle of the traditional brick and mortar and e-commerce, that's exactly where they should be right now. And why is that? Well, next page. This is the big thing, my big takeaway from the earnings report. We saw estimates, and then we saw the actual report, and earnings overall was 1 cent less per share, no big deal, than the estimates by the market. And so what happened, the next day, the hedge funds, whoever else, the powers that be, decided that GameStop should crash and tried to introduce some new fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And the price crashed the next day, but then people were like, no, actually, GameStop is actually worth $190. And so, big money, they saw that as an opportunity to buy in and drive that price back up closer to $200. And why is that? Well, here's the big thing that I saw. Look at their online digital sales growth. I mean, 2019, we see just pretty much flat between 2016 and 2020, or sorry, in 2019, but then 2020, we saw a huge jump in this. And this is the direction that GameStop is going. You compare that to Chewy, where I'd say GameStop is similar to where Chewy was in 2015. And I think that 2021 may see similar growth, but really I think 2022 is going to be a huge year where GameStop introduces itself as a major player in e-commerce. And so, again, GameStop right now, or at least for 2020, is probably equivalent to 2015. I don't expect that big of a jump between 2015 and 2016 because the pieces are still being put in place. But then, 2021 to 2022, that jump is probably going to be similar to Chewy from 2015 to 2016. So, look at all these recent events. And ask yourself, again, is GameStop a brick and mortar retailer or an e-commerce company? Right now, I mean, they're moving towards somewhere in the middle, but the direction they're heading, by all means, seems to be e-commerce. Okay, so recent events. I couldn't even fit everything that they're doing on this page. The pieces that they are putting in place, it's so abundantly clear to me where they want to go. And I'll get to this in a second. I am an e-commerce retailer. That's my day job. Okay, so I see a lot of these words that may just seem like whatever to you, and I see, oh my goodness, the directions that they want to go. It's mind-blowing to me. It's so exciting. All right, so recent events. CCO Frank Hamlin and CFO Jim Bell both, quote, resign. They got fired. Let's just say it how it is. Several board members, quote, retire. Okay, yeah, several board members retire. Yeah, say it how you want for whatever, for HR purposes. But then they added a bunch of people. Elliot Wilkie, Chief Growth Officer, former Director of Amazon Fresh. GameStop raided Amazon. And the fact that Amazon people would want to go to GameStop, of all places, GameStop, that should indicate to you something. But all right, Elliot Wilkie. Jenna Owens, Chief Operating Officer, former Director of Multi-Channel Fulfillment at Amazon. Multi-channel fulfillment. That rings something in my mind, okay? Amazon made a ton of money on third-party sellers like myself, sending all of their inventory to them, and Amazon charging a fee, like for if I were to sell something on eBay, but that item was stored in Amazon warehouse, I would. This is what multi-channel fulfillment is. I would enter the information of that product and where it needs to go, the address, on Amazon, and it would get fulfilled. My Amazon item would get fulfilled to an eBay customer. If I had an e-commerce website, what I would do, I would send all of my inventory into Amazon and have Amazon send that in. That's what multi-channel fulfillment is. But moving on, Kelly Durkin, Senior Vice President of Customer Care, Chewy's former Vice President of Customer Service. So we're seeing a theme here. Chewy, Amazon, Josh Kruger, VP of Fulfillment. Remember that word, fulfillment. Not multi-channel fulfillment, but GameStop's direct fulfillment. And now, formerly he had senior fulfillment roles at Amazon, Walmart, and QVC. He will oversee management of e-commerce fulfillment centers. All right. What are e-commerce fulfillment centers? If you know about Amazon, Amazon has and is continuing to build these massive warehouses all over the country where I send my inventory, essentially where Amazon wants me to send their inventory to. Thankfully, it's somewhere close, so I don't have to pay a lot of money to UPS. But this is what a fulfillment center is GameStop is going to be building these warehouses, these fulfillment centers. And they're going to be all over the country, and people are going to go to them to buy electronics, to buy video games, to buy... from what I understand, media items like music and DVDs, and they are going to ship them from these fulfillment centers. And my opinion, my thought on this is that it's going to be similar to Amazon Prime, where they're going to promise 2-day delivery at the slowest. And man, that excites me. Andrea Wolf, VP of Brand Development, another Chewy exec, Chewy's VP of Marketing. There's a long list. I think I included about half the names on this list. And it's clear to me, again, Chewy, Amazon, GameStop has become, they will have their brick and mortar locations for as long as they need them, or not as long as they need, as long as they want them. But the direction they're moving is e-commerce, which matters. And here's another chart. Here's the pie. Amazon's a large majority of their revenue was on their electronics and media sales. And this is a huge pie here. And we see Amazon, Apple, Best Buy, and Walmart are the biggest players in this. And then that orange circle is pretty much, it's everyone else. I expect GameStop to have a visible piece of this pie, not just that orange sliver, but a visible piece. Will they be Walmart when it comes to electronic and media? I don't know, but if they do, even if they get to half of Walmart's slice there, that for the value of their stock, given how few shares are available, that is going to skyrocket the price. And so I'm not talking about the squeezes here. That's entirely a different thing. I like the stock. Okay? And this is why. Other factors involved with the transition to e-commerce. Reddit can and will function as the opposite of a hedge fund. You have no idea. You might have an idea. If you don't, let me just say, what this is doing for GameStop's branding is just, it's worth more than any amount of advertising budget could provide. And the fact that we have an army of weaponized autists who are in support of GameStop, who want to see GameStop succeed, it's going to be not a self-fulfilling prophecy. We are the driving force behind this company having success. And you'll see that at the next earnings report in June. You will see for Q1 of 2021 a boost in their sales because of the Reddit army. We're acting as the opposite of a hedge fund. We are going to turn GameStop into a major player. And Ryan Cohen's going to do most of the work and all the execs that he's bringing on. But we're going to be a major player in that. Another fact. This is really interesting, and I appreciate this mindset. GameStop leases all of their locations. It's like you think about GameStop in comparison to Walmart, in comparison to Best Buy. It's like Walmart, for them to, if they were to just want to go all e-commerce and shut down their locations, it would be a logistical nightmare because they own a lot of the buildings that they're in. And what are you going to do? You're going to sell those? Who's going to buy a former Walmart building? There aren't many options, especially as we have transitioned from brick and mortar to e-commerce. Not that Walmart would ever do that. It's just if they wanted to, it would be a headache. But GameStop leases all of their locations. Within a year, or maybe 2 or something, they could shut down all of their locations, and that wouldn't be a problem. That would actually cut a lot of their overhead. Now, I don't want that to happen. I want GameStop to continue to employ their employees. I want the company to thrive. I want people to go in. I want access. I want GameStops to be hubs for if I were to buy something online, I could just walk into my local GameStop and pick that up. I think that there is a need and a benefit to their location staying open. But if they were like, no, we're just going to be entirely e-commerce, they could shut that down in a heartbeat, and it wouldn't be any kind of logistical nightmare. Again, all right, another thing. Esports is a huge growth industry. GameStop will surely be grabbing a piece of that pie. There are plans in the place for expanding their niche into the global online marketplace. All right, I've heard rumblings of this, and I love it. All right, what do we love about GameStop? I think a lot of people, it's like, they're dusting off their Super Nintendos, and they're going to a place where they can buy Super Nintendo games, and what's the first place that comes to mind? It's probably GameStop. Or something like that. And maybe not Super Nintendo games anymore, but like PS2, PS3. You go to GameStop, you buy a used game, and it's exciting, it's fun. So when I think about the brick and mortar, if they were to all shut down, it's like, yeah, that would be a bummer. But at the same time, if that's their niche, which it doesn't need to be, but that's what a lot of people picture when they think of GameStop. They have plans for that as well to expand that to e-commerce. And so you don't need to worry about that if all of a sudden they were like, nope, we're going to be entirely e-commerce. So I see the potential that I see is that it's similar with GameStop to Apple with their Apple stores. That most people, I think, when they order Apple products, they order them online or even in other stores. They even order them on Amazon. But, there's Apple stores that it's nice to go in an Apple store and to get some things taken care of. I would think that the same thing would happen with GameStop, where we think of GameStop as more e-commerce, where if you were to buy something that GameStop sells, you would be buying that online. But then the convenience of having a GameStop store still is there. So with that in mind, again, price to sales ratio, where will GameStop belong on this chart as they transition to e-commerce? If at the very least they are worth a price to sales ratio of 4, and they're matched up with Chewy and Amazon, that puts GameStop around $375 a share. I would argue that it's somewhere between Chewy and Amazon and Apple. And if so, that GameStop's price should be around $500 a share. Now, I'm not saying that that's where it should absolutely be right now, but as far as where I think the stock price will go, forgetting about the short squeeze, let's say the MOAS happens, all of a sudden we're in this position where GameStop is worth $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, etc. a share. And then it goes back down and settles. I think that settling point should be in 2022, 2023, something like that, around $500 a share. I truly, truly believe that. But we will see. So that is it for this presentation. I hope you enjoyed. Again, if you like this content, please like and subscribe, and I will surely be attempting at least to deliver more content to you. Have a great weekend. I will most certainly be seeing you around again. If you are a subscriber to this channel, peace.